Hello and welcome to another vlog. I'm Manur and today I will be talking about my Oxford interview experience. To be very honest, it was quite daunting before it happened, but while it was happening, I found it really amazing and I enjoyed it to quite an extent. It felt like a discussion. So, how did I prepare for my interview and what it actually feels like being in that interview? Because it was really daunting to me before I went in there and I actually talked to those people. So the thing is, I applied by the January deadline, and about 10 to 12 days before the interview was supposed to happen, I received an email from the department telling me I have been shortlisted for an interview and that my interview will be held on so and so date and time. They also give me a list of five professors who will be included in the interview panel. So from that point onwards, I prepared for the interview. Firstly, I went through the profiles of those five people who were supposed to be in the interview panel, and that also included the professor whose lab I was applying to. So I already knew what he did, but for the four others, I went through their profile and tried to identify what kind of questions they would be interested in or what was their area of research. So this is how I started my preparation. Then I also read a few papers that my potential supervisor had sent to me, and also went through his lab details again just so that I could be up to date with what's happening there. And I also searched a lot of online resources about what Oxford and Cambridge interviews look like. So I couldn't really find anything about PhD interviews in particular, but I also picked up tips and tricks from the undergrad interviews that happen, because Oxford and Cambridge interviews are known to be very daunting and like famously quite grilling. But my experience was quite different. It was long, it was sort of grilling, but I found it to be quite like a discussion. Maybe it's just my opinion or my experience, but I will share with you what happened. So the thing is that once I knew that five people would be interviewing me, and I went through their profiles and everything, and I went through every tip and trick available on the internet about how to prepare. I also read through my own motivation letter, my own research proposal, and my supposed supervisor's lab profile, so that I knew what I had in mind and what topics I could freely discuss or easily talk about. And to be very honest, there is no concise way of how you can prepare for interviews. There are certain tips and tricks that are very important, but no matter how much you prepare, you cannot predict what questions will be asked. So you need to be prepared to talk about something that comes out of the unknown. A few days before the interview, they had already given me the name of the people who would be interviewing me, and they also told me that an hour or so before the interview, they will send me either a research paper or a PDF document, which I will have to read through, and that is what they will be questioning me about to certain extent. An additional thing that I had to do, because I was a master's student and I told them I was currently doing research. Even if you're not doing a research project, for graduate admissions and for PhD interviews, they tell you to prepare a short presentation of about 5 to 10 minutes about what you are currently doing or what projects you've previously worked on. So, as someone who was applying to the medical science division, I had to talk about my biology research or whatever I was doing in my master's. So I prepared a very short presentation of about 5 to 6 slides, and that's about it. Even those 5 to 6 slides were mainly just graphs and pointers about what I was going to be talking about. And I prepared the presentation to last maximum 7 minutes, not more than that. Because I was given 10 minutes, I did not want to go into too many details or make it a rushed presentation if they asked me something in between. So, as promised, an hour before the interview, they sent me a PDF document. The PDF document said, "We think this particular protein is associated with this function. Do you think this graph proves our hypothesis?" And things like that. So there was a few other details in that. I cannot share the graph because of confidentiality and because it's not my own. So, but that's the gist of it. They give you a hypothesis, a kind of a graph or something, depending on what field you are from, and you have to read through it and identify points that they might question you about. So once the interview started, as promised, there were five people. Firstly, they asked me to do my own presentation. I did my presentation. I was at that time working on hepatitis E virus, and I shared my results about what I had found and what that virus is associated with, how I've studied it, and what results I've identified through my research. And then they questioned me for about 10 minutes about my research, about what I had done, about what I planned to do while finishing off that research, and that's about it. So next they told me that, can you please pick up the document we sent you and let's talk about it. So what they did next was they told me, oh, you see that graph and this hypothesis, do you think this graph proves our hypothesis? And if not, then what is the next thing you can do, or what other tips do you have for improving this experiment, or what other methods do you think can be applicable? For example, if it is a molecular study and you find gene expression through PCR, then do you think you can find it another way as well? And you sort of have to then think about the other experiments or other protocols that could give you similar results or better results. And they also talked to me about what controls can you include in experiment, because with experiments you need to have solid controls as well, the positive controls, the negative controls, and how can you improve that experiment, how can you prove that that experiment is enough to prove your hypothesis. So that was the main gist of that conversation, and this lasted for about 15 minutes. During that time, I didn't have all the answers because I hadn't worked on different so many different techniques. I didn't have any practical knowledge, but I sort of talked through it, and they also prompted me with, do you think this would work? Do you think this would not work? Because the thing is, they're not trying to judge you on the basis of what you know. They don't want someone who's already an expert. That's not the point. They want someone who is teachable. So they try to ask you questions about things that might or might not be correct, but they just want to see how you think. That is what I experienced. So there were things where I said, I don't know, but I think this is what we can do. And that is very important, because you do not have to show them that you're very rigid in what you know, or you are just someone who gives up after saying I don't know. You need to think about it, discuss with them. That is one thing that I learned during my interview, and I had picked this up through the online advice already available. So I talked to them through it. They talked to me through the process of how they think this would be done. And it was sort of a discussion about how you plan experiments. And it was really, really interesting. I think of all the things I've done in my life, I enjoyed the interview so much that it was an amazing experience. At that point, when I was discussing it with them, it didn't feel like an interview. It was like you're learning from the best in the world. These are five professors working in the number one university in the world, and they're talking you through what they think and would make an experiment work. I think that is just something out of the world. It was for me, at least. It was an amazing experience, and at that point in time I did not care what the outcome would be. I just wanted to discuss it further with them, and that is how I enjoyed it. So once that was done, they sort of talked to me through some questions, and since it was a degree in oncology, they did ask me about the hallmarks of cancer and what hallmark would be most interesting to me. So this is one question that I had prepared for, because I knew if I'm applying to a degree in cancer biology, I should at least know the basics. So I had prepared some basics, and because I wanted to work on oncolytic viruses, what I did was I saw the hallmarks of cancer and how these hallmarks relate to therapy. So the way I gave my answer was which hallmark was most interesting to me and why it was most interesting to me. The why was attached to how it helps oncolytic viruses to grow specifically in cancer. So that is how I prepared my answer, and that is how I discussed it with them. This led to further discussions, because most of the questions in PhD interviews or research interviews are leading questions. They lead to different questions from that. So then they talked about oncolytic viruses and why I was interested in them. One of the interviewers asked me what was the latest paper I had read. I talked about the latest paper I had read and what I found interesting in that, what was the key finding. It was a good discussion. And then one of the professors there asked me why I am choosing oncolytic viruses but not epigenetic control of gene expression or epigenetic based therapy of cancer. The reason he asked this was because on my CV, I had mentioned an online course that I had done on genetic control of gene expression. So he asked me, if you've already done a course on that, and that means you are interested in something that you did an online course on it, how do you know that you want to do work on oncolytic viruses rather than something you have a certification for. And this was something I wasn't expecting, although I should have. But the way I answered it, I told him that I have studied oncolytic viruses online as well. I didn't find a course on it, and I loved studying epigenetics, and I did a course on it because it was really, really interesting. But doing that course and exploring this and further, exploring the two topics in parallel and deciding what I already know and what I want to know became easier for me because I was basically a virologist. I sort of didn't see myself giving up on studying viruses for anything. Although I liked epigenetics, I'm still very much interested in it, but I don't see myself working long term or being very happy working on it because I would know that I gave up on something that was my absolute passion because I love viruses. I could not give up on that, and doing a PhD is a long term commitment. I would ideally want to work on something that I am extremely passionate about rather than something that I find interesting but not interesting enough to study long term. So that is how I answered, and I think they liked my answer. They also asked me if I have any further questions, so I had prepared a few questions for them. I asked them about uh, animal courses and the licensing process because that is something I wasn't familiar with. I didn't have any experience of working with animals or mice, and I really wanted to experience that. So I asked them what is the process. They guided me through it, and I also asked them about courses because I was switching fields. I had never studied cancer biology as a subject before. I had studied viruses, basic biotechnology, but not cancer. So I told them that although it's a PhD and I don't want to do any more coursework, but how can I learn more about it? And because I knew that department had an MSc course in cancer biology, I asked them if I could have access to the uh, materials that were taught there, and if I could have some way of catching up or brushing my knowledge about the basic molecular biology of cancer. So they told me that it's possible, and as a registered student of the department, you have access to all the coursework that is taught there for MSc, which was quite nice to me. So I felt like it was really useful to have questions you could ask them as well. There were many other questions which I can't go into the details of because it was more particular to my topic and what I thought about it. But yeah, the general thing is they ask you about background knowledge of the field you're choosing. They ask you about the things they send you to read and your background knowledge, what you're doing currently, and that's about it. It's it's an amazing discussion. I think it's a great experience in itself. And at that point I was feeling just being shortlisted for this interview and just having the chance of talking to these professors is such an amazing experience that I was just happy I had that experience. And thankfully it turned out positive and I did end up getting an admission. It was a great experience, and I think you should just take it as an opportunity to discuss your field, to convey your passion, and to show them that you are teachable. That is the most important thing, and it should work for you. I truly believe that being passionate and actually interested in something comes across, and people are able to judge whether you're actually passionate about something. And it's completely okay to say that I don't know. It's okay to say you don't know something, but just do not stop there. Do not be someone who doesn't want to discuss. Be open to discussions, be open to maybe even pointed out that you are wrong. Just be teachable. That is what they want. They do not want an expert, they want someone who is teachable. That is what my experience was. And that's it from my side for today. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.